So I want to wish everybody a good morning and Happy New Year once again. And thank you for attending the LIAFPN meeting. I think this is a very crucial meeting for anyone in the business, in any business, whether you're an accountant, attorney, financial professional. Networking and and building relationships is the core of our business. It's the core of Main Street Plan. It's the core of LIFPN. We have forged ahead this year from starting with 0 members. We have over 30 members now. And I thank all of you for that. And that's because we're building relationships, and we're building relationships in a new way. And today's speaker, Carl, is an expert in building relationships and teaching us how to network, not sell. So with no further ado, Carl, please take it away.
Pull up the right screen here. Can everybody see the slide? Networking, it's not selling?
Not yet.
Nope.
Nope. Let's try it again. Oh, because I got to hit the share button. How about now?
There we go.
Now we see it.
Better.
Excellent. Excellent. So thank you. Thank you very much, Neil. Thank you to the LIAFPN for allowing us to showcase this collection of thoughts on networking, how it is, in fact, not selling that we often make it out to be. I have a lot to get through. I'm just going to warn everyone, first and foremost, this is a fast-paced presentation, so buckle up. If you're prepared to take notes, please put down the pencil, put down the notebook, shut down Microsoft OneNote if you're one of the 3 people who use it, and just tune in. I do promise you that any slide with this cyan box on it, I will be happy to make available to you after the presentation in summary form. I will not torture you with all 38 slides. But I find that if I'm going to tune into a presentation like this, I want to be entertained. So I feel a very heightened obligation to entertain you this morning and at the same time make this very tangible and interesting. I will, by the end of the presentation, not only help you disassociate networking with the specific act of selling, but give you an explicit framework for expanding the networks that matter to you. So with that all having been said, let me give a quick sense of my own background. I started out in the investment banking industry as a corporate finance guy, but eventually moving into sales and trading, and eventually a block trader, trading arbitrage strategies for different hedge fund clients. This is what we call in the industry hitting for the cycle. So if we have anybody out there who's played baseball or softball, you'll recognize these boxes. I spent some time in an American investment bank, a Japanese investment bank, a British investment bank, and a German investment bank, which moved to the United States, became known for First Eagle Funds and George Soros. Whoops. Animations got ahead of themselves, and eventually got bought by a French investment bank. So that's hitting for the cycle in the investment banking industry. I eventually moved out to Long Island in the late 2000s, where I started my own financial planning firm, Friedrich Wealth Management. I soon merged that into Piermont, and then eventually took that client base over to FCE Group. FCE Group was actually bought by CapTrust in late 2018 and spun off my current firm, Excelsior. I'm not going to give a commercial on my current firm today, other than to say Excelsior sets up a fund of hedge fund vehicles for independent wealth managers. That's what I do currently. So I am not a full-time networking circuit speaker, as you'll become painfully aware shortly. But I also have a public service life. I've done some work for the Nassau County Comptroller's Audit Committee. I've served on Locust Valley Central School District Board of Education, and I'm currently a trustee and actually the deputy mayor for the Village of Upper Brookville. This is entirely too much information, and I would strongly discourage you from sharing this much of your career background in a networking introduction. But I only do it today because these different spheres of contact are going to be entirely relevant later on in the presentation. So thank you for bearing with me. Let's diffuse the title. I'm sure there are some of you showing up today who are in no small part offended by the concept of saying that networking is not selling. That there's that inner Blake inside of you saying, but you know, what do you mean? Networking is about identifying prospects. It's about selling. And notwithstanding the fact that Blake was a critically flawed character within that movie,
Great movie.
I acknowledge that we all have that Blake in the back of our head telling us that we need to be advancing our businesses. And I understand that and I respect that. In full disclosure, I have my own Coffee is for Closers mug sitting here on my desk out of view. So I understand and respect that notion. But that being said, if you don't believe me that networking is not selling, let's go to the official word, or at least Google. And at the risk of getting all Oxfordian on you, the action or process of interacting with others to exchange information and develop professional or social contacts. That is the best definition of networking that I know. You'll notice as you whip out your magnifying glass, there is nowhere in this definition the word sell or selling. So what am I really getting at? Well, let me take whatever you learned in B school, whatever you learned in undergrad about business, I'm going to break it down to two very simple dimensions: buying and selling. And the act of conducting business is a matter of talking and listening. Right now, I'm talking, you're listening. Let's fill these, as a business student myself, I can't help but populate a matrix when I see it. The typical buying and listening experience is maybe with you and your spouse or your significant other buying a house. You're checking it out, you're listening to what the realtor has to say, you're taking account of the accoutrements, you are listening and making a buying decision. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum is the pushy used car salesman. Someone who, as soon as you walk onto the lot, they're talking your ear off, they're trying to nudge you in the direction, whatever's going to yield them the greatest commission. This is what I would call, within the concept of business, a pitching and hitting relationship, at the risk of beating all my baseball references to death. If I were to continue to just fill this out, not that it's entirely relevant to our presentation today, the listening and selling quadrant is best occupied by those of you who conduct consultative selling. And I know that consultative selling is basically how a lot of you make your living day to day. So there is a place for selling, of course, in business. You wouldn't conduct business without buying and selling. So there's a place for consultative selling. And the best example I can think of when you're buying and talking is when you call to order a pizza. You know what you want, you know who you're identifying, you know how much you're going to pay, you call, get me this on time, etc. So what I want to do next is I actually just want to take business as we know it, and I want to boil it down a little bit, because I'm not here to talk to you about business alone today. I'm here to talk to you about networking. So let's scratch out the buying and the selling altogether, and let's whittle down networking to just talking and listening, the core tenets. So rather than a pitcher and hitter relationship, let's think of it as more like a casual lob in the backyard. Okay, now we've set the groundwork for what can be a networking type relationship. We've extracted the buying and selling from the relationship entirely. Sweet reciprocity. Okay, you engage someone, tell me about your business. And they say, well, I'm in the business of X, Y, and Z. And then, importantly and reciprocatively, tell me about your business. Well, I'm in the business of this, that, and the other thing. Okay, that's how a networking conversation gets started. So just to touch base, and this is one of those slides I'm happy to circulate to you. So again, no need to take notes. Selling, okay? A product or service offering on the table. A buyer and seller relationship, or the pitcher and the hitter, okay? And an explicit value exchange is eventually identified. Compare that to networking, okay? Networking is about ideas, okay? Networking is a two-way sharing of information and an exploration of opportunities. And I know there's at least one of you in the background right now saying, Carl, that's all well good. You can hold hands, sing songs here, but I got goals to meet. My inner Blake is telling me that if I'm going to be networking, I need to know to what end. If I'm going to expend this time and effort, where's it going to get me? Okay. Well, before I answer that, let me first ask the question, is all networking good networking? Well, the one part of my resume I left out, the answer is of course not. Okay. Sometimes there's just meeting, okay? And I actually started a company, some of you actually might have even been members back about 10 years ago, called Go Schmooze. And what Go Schmooze was actually a website. It was a paid membership. People would join, and the objective was, you pick the time, you pick the location, we'll bring you to a table for lunch at the location of your choice, where you'll meet up to 3 other professionals with whom you do not compete and whom you have not met in the past. Sounds pretty good. Well, in this case, let's say we had a real estate broker. We've got someone who films commercials. We've got, that's me over there. Of course, I was hairier and heavier. The financial planner and pharmaceutical salesperson. This is not an atypical demonstration of the type of people that would show up for a Go Schmooze event. Go Schmooze definitely delivered on its promise to be convenient. It delivered on its promise to sit people with people that were not their competitors. However, perhaps one of the fatal flaws for go schmooze, at least at the time, is that meeting people is not networking. And here's what I mean by that. In this particular case, all the names and faces are made up, but the real estate salesperson was coming up ultimately to pitch the other three people at the table. Meanwhile, the person who's making the commercials is out to pitch her services to the other people. I was there as the financial planner trying, if anything, not to look like someone who was pitching, but ultimately they didn't want to hear what I had to say because they thought I'd pitch them. And then the pharmaceutical salesperson was sitting there thinking, what the hell am I doing here? And never came back again. So I don't mean to suggest that all networking is good networking, but networking with a purpose can be very, very effective at advancing your goals. So with whom do I seek to network is an important question, but not nearly as important as the question you ought to be asking, which is whomst seek to network with me? That is how you actually get somewhere by networking. And I'll show you what I mean by that. And that is to say, networking is not checkers, it's chess. You got to be thinking 2 moves ahead if you want to be able to build a network, and a network that you can utilize for a stated goal. So the question, the real question, who wants to meet you? Well, I think if you thought about this for a while, you'd logically arrive at these same conclusions. People who want to sell you their product or service, people who want to meet your clients, people who find you interesting, people who think you can help them, people with whom you've lost touch, people who wish to engage your network, or people who want to buy your product or service. And by now, if you've been paying attention and not trying to jot down notes as we go along, you already recognize the pitching and hitting sections of this list. So at its core, a lot of the best networking actually gets done in the middle of this checklist. Let's take it a step further. Not who wants to meet you, but who wants to meet Joe Montgomery, Esquire, who's a divorce attorney, completely made up, but this is him. Well, who wants to meet Joe? People who want to sell Joe their product or service, people who want to meet Joe's clients, people with whom Joe's lost touch, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Why do I bring up Joe Montgomery, and why does it relate to you? Because in this example, you know Joe Montgomery. And so the real question, who wants to network with you, are the people who want to get to know people like Joe Montgomery. So in other words, people who believe you can introduce them to the people that matter to them. Now you start to see what we're talking about by thinking 2 moves ahead in terms of networking effectively and identifying people who want to take the time to get to know you. Let's meet George Barlow, CDFA. CDFA, I'm sure this crowd knows what a CDFA is, but it's a certified divorce financial analyst. Here's George, okay? In this particular example, George wants to network with divorce attorneys. And of course, this is the international sign for divorce attorney. Well, George is going to get there. He decides he wants to get there by networking, by even heavier and better coiffed me, by networking. Okay, well, it turns out I know Joe. And Joe, as we've established, is a divorce attorney. So George is going to spend the time networking with me because he feels it will get him closer to networking with Joe, but only if, and I hope you picked up this nuance at this point, Joe feels that George can engage in a networking relationship, not pitching and hitting, selling and buying relationship. So how do we get to that point? Sounds daunting. It's not. Networking at its core is an altruistic exercise, okay? Two of my favorite films here on the screen, but also you can't open a newspaper these days without reading about a Starbucks where people are paying for the people on back of them. Networking, when you convince yourself that not only is networking not selling, but it's ultimately, when done effectively and fruitfully, starts as an altruistic exercise. Shifting gears slightly here to drive this point home. Back when LinkedIn did cool things, because it really hasn't evolved much over the past years. I don't know, I can't see everyone right now, but maybe for everyone else's benefit, if you've ever seen the LinkedIn maps, this is a concept that's about 6 or 7 years old before they retired. LinkedIn used to actually take your network on LinkedIn and would graphically map the different areas to which you were connected. And the way they would choose the color coding actually had a lot to do with the employer or entity with which you were associated. Unfortunately, they retired it toward the end of 2014. So the concept itself hasn't been used for going on almost 10 years now. And it's a real shame because I, for one, not only found it radically interesting, but as I started to do more and more networking, started to find real value in the tool. So let's start with me. And because LinkedIn won't do it for us anymore, I did it myself. I'm going to create my own LinkedIn map here and now. I actually took my current LinkedIn profile with my LinkedIn picture, and I started mapping a few different people in different spheres. Okay, in the upper right, you've got my investment banking life. In the middle, you've got my financial planning life. And in the bottom, you've got my public service life. So the good news is that there's some value to be had by this, but LinkedIn was actually only so smart. Because from a networking perspective, just affiliating those people with common entities wasn't really enough to drive the networking process. And in fact, the spheres of relationship that matter to me, or at least matter to me now in my current line of work, are CPAs, and not just any CPAs, but really tax CPAs, attorneys, not just trust and estate, not just any attorney, but trust and estate attorneys, and financial planners, specifically independent wealth management oriented financial planners. LinkedIn would not have done this for me via InMaps. Okay, so I have to do it myself. I'm actually encouraging you to do it yourself, but I'm not suggesting you need to sit there with your fifth grader's compass and draw out these clever arcs and connect the pictures. I have a much more streamlined and easy way of doing that. Let's talk about network targeting. How do we go about identifying the people with whom we're going to network by first identifying who wants to network with us? There's networking for the purpose of prospecting. There's networking for the purpose of changing your career, conducting a job search. There's networking for pursuing your passions or interests. I'm actually going to give you an example of all three of these because I want to help you disassociate not only networking from selling, but networking solely as a prospecting tool can actually be utilized for many other different things. And only once you start to understand that, can you maybe better deploy it as maybe a prospecting tool, if that's what you want to do. Let's go back to George Barlow. You remember him. He's the certified divorce financial, I hope I'm not butchering that. Yeah, financial analyst. And let me just, if anyone will appreciate this, it's this crowd. I understand that most people do not make a career as a CDFA and nothing else. Most people tag that on to another, either their work as maybe an attorney or a financial or as a CFP. I get that, but just roll with me here because I'm trying to make an example. He graduated from Hofstra with a BSBA and an MBA in accounting. He started his career as an accountant. He became a CDFA 3 years ago. He networked to find his current CDFA job. He then networked to find professionals that can introduce him to potential clients. I'll paint that with the prospecting brush in this case. He eventually came to serve on his local board of education and was passionate about education technology, or ed tech as it's known, but to what end to be determined, okay? So this is how George effectively leveraged his spheres of influence. I'm not using centers of influence, his spheres of influence to bring himself closer to his objective. First, the job search. He wanted to get closer to firms that specialize in CDFA work. Well, he already had a decent group of people that he knew. And I'm using clouds here because I want you to think of those LinkedIn InMap clouds. He had a group of CPAs in the Long Island region that he knew. And of course, he also knew quite a few Hofstra alumni, okay? And so he engaged in part by identifying who these different counterparts want to meet. He identified the commonalities among these two different groups and also identified opportunities to introduce them to each other, which eventually brought him closer to the CDFA firms. Now, he knew one or two, but he didn't really have an in. And by getting to know these different clouds better, by offering to introduce people, people inevitably introduced him and brought him closer to where he was trying to go. Another example. Yes, George, you got there. Okay. Prospecting. Once he got his CDFA job, George wanted to get closer to divorce attorneys who are excellent referral sources for the type of work he does as a CDFA. Well, once again, he leveraged the CPA groups that he knew, and he also leveraged the financial planners he got to know over the course of his career, because over time he did a decent amount of compliance work and got to know a number of financial planners. Well, much like the prior slide, He interfaced with those folks. He offered to make introductions in and among those different communities. And furthermore, they in turn came to introduce him to other divorce attorneys that he did not yet know, which allowed him to eventually network further into these different circles and get to know more people that helped him be in a better position to find divorce attorneys that may be in a position to send clients his way. Last one, I won't spend as much time on this one, but this one's important because we're talking about actually a non-defined goal. George wanted to get closer to something. He didn't know exactly what it was, but he knew he was interested in education technology. We've already established he served on the Board of Education, that he's a Hofstra alum. Not unlike the prior slides, he continued to network, offer to make introductions, and work his way toward the things that, and talk about what really interested him. And because he was engaging people that took the time to listen to what he was interested in, they eventually made introductions of George to people. Eventually, he made his way to find an ed tech firm located out here on Long Island called Virtual Classrooms, who eventually offered George a board seat as they got to know him a little bit more. So this speaks to how you can leverage networking to actually get closer to goals that you may not have explicitly defined. That's how powerful the concept is. So in terms of creating your own networking opportunities, this is one of the money shots here. Map your existing network, group by functional spheres, identify the spheres that you're targeting, even if some of those spheres may be to be determined. They may exist within the spaces between the other networks with which you're already connected. And then exploit what I call your unnatural networking advantage. It's unnatural because nobody else can naturally develop it, but only you. They need to be you to develop this particular networking advantage. And this is what I mean by that. Leveraging your existing network connections. Remember the InMap? Again, you can't do this on LinkedIn anymore. Don't try to do it yourself. I'm going to give you a framework in just a minute that would allow you to do that effectively and easily using nothing more than an Excel spreadsheet. No, it will not look as pretty, but it will get you where you need to be. So in this case, let's assume for a moment that this person's InMap is right here. This is where they want to get closer. So in my prior slide, this may be the divorce attorneys for the CDFA person, okay? And then meanwhile, they've got this group of contacts with whom they're connected and this other group of contacts in green with whom they're connected, okay? And these two different groups, as you could tell by the connections, they have a shared influence. It may be a client base, it may be interests, it may be some degree of expertise, but they share this, and that's relevant and critical to getting you closer to your target from a networking perspective. So to better define this unnatural networking advantage, and it's unique to you and only you, identify the spheres in which you wish to have more influence, identify the related spheres in which you already have influence, and then offer to connect members in the related spheres. Be altruistic, pay it forward, focus on what you can do for others, understand who wants to meet you first and foremost before focusing on making a connection that matters to you, because I've shown it can get you closer to where you want to be. This will pull you closer to your target sphere, even if that target sphere is not explicitly and finely defined. So let me pull this back a little bit. This is, I guess this is Neil Emmett. Sorry, Neil, but you were on the internet, so I copied it. Neil spends time networking in the orange cloud. He spends time introducing people in the green cloud, maybe to people in the orange cloud and to people in the blue cloud. But by doing this, this helps him increase the number of people that he knows in the target zone. So by expanding the number of contacts you have within those reciprocating clouds, it naturally and organically helps you increase the level of contact within the cloud that you're targeting. Blake would give that a big fist pump, by the way, because that's getting us closer to our goal in this case. But anyway, the networking versus prospecting fallacy, just to drive this point home, okay? I don't want to network unless it will put me in front of prospects. That's the mentality some people have. Some of you might even be saying today, that's the mentality I have. I'm not going to invest time in networking unless it explicitly puts me in front of prospects. Well, the problem with that is that prospects show up to the meeting to be sold. And if you've got people lining up to sit down with you to be sold, then great. Then maybe you don't need to utilize networking as a prospecting tool. But for people who are utilizing networking as a tool for prospecting, utilizing it correctly, networkers okay? Networkers show up to the meeting to find the next network. And then they show up at that meeting to find the next networking meeting, and then et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in other words, what I'm really telling you is don't network with prospects, don't prospect with networkers. Important asterisk here, in the same meeting. Okay, that's not to say someone with whom you're networking can eventually become a prospect, or someone with whom you're prospecting can eventually be a networking contact. But when you have a meeting, that meeting needs to be clearly defined. What is the realm for this meeting? Are we networking or are we prospecting? Am I pitching and you're hitting, or vice versa? Don't do the same at the same time in the same meeting. So here's that long promised framework for organizing your network that doesn't involve drawing 90-degree arcs on a piece of paper with colored pencils. I'm actually going to use Alex, another CDFA, as an example. She's focused on meeting divorce attorneys that may have clients who need her services. Okay, these divorce attorneys, again, thinking 2 steps ahead, the divorce attorneys have common clients and receive client referrals from, in this case, forensic accountants and private investigators. I guess I watched too much LA Law in the 80s, but at any rate, that's how she's thinking ahead, and she knows that her contacts in this area, they have contacts that matter to them in those different categories. So now here's the map, okay? So group A, divorce attorneys. In this case, let's make group A the group that she wants to get closer to. Group B and group C are going to help her get closer to that. In this case, the forensic accountants and the private investigators, okay? The first thing we're going to do is we're going to outline, in this case, she happens to be prospecting. You can substitute prospect for target. You can substitute interests for target, whatever you're targeting here, okay? That's why I chose not to use prospects here. In this case, whatever you're targeting, put those people here in the top, okay? We're not going to put the forensic accountants or private investigators here because these are the people with whom you're trying to get closer. Again, don't network with prospects, don't prospect with networkers. The rest of this will make sense in just a moment, okay? Next, connectors. We define connectors as those people who can introduce you to, I wrote prospects, I'm sorry, I meant to write targets. People who can introduce you to targets. Okay, in this case, here's a group of connectors that Alex already knows, okay? Divorce attorneys, forensic accountants, private investigators, all 3 buckets, okay? Beyond connectors, there are networkers. Networkers are people, they're not connectors, they're not going to get you closer to your targets, but they are going to introduce you to connectors, okay? And those networkers might look like this. She, in surveying her LinkedIn profile, these are the people who fall into these different buckets that she's identified can get her closer to the connectors, who can get her closer to her targets. And then while you're at it, as you conduct your networking activity, you ultimately need to trim the dead wood. Again, networking is an altruistic exercise where you're trying to make effective introductions to other people to help them get closer to what they want. You have to trim the dead wood. So as you're making introductions to people and they're either not responsive or maybe they're not all you made them out to be, you have to move those people off the matrix. Don't just keep introducing people that are not perceived to be good introductions, because then your introduction, the whole mechanism of your networking introduction gets basically gets diluted. So be sure to make sure you trim the dead wood in your networking exercise. And then bringing it all together, you can see I made liberal use here of grouping. This is the money shot here, if you will. This is what it all looks like. So again, this is something you could do with nothing more than popping open an Excel spreadsheet, popping open your LinkedIn profile, examining your contacts. And by the way, nothing wrong with having people on deck. No more baseball references, I promise. Nothing wrong with having people on deck. These are the people that you're looking to get closer to within those different buckets. It's always a good idea to visualize where they're going to fit into the scheme of your own networking activity. Hey, by the way, this group here, this is not a lot of names. Even when I exclude the unresponsive people and I exclude the potential additions, just simple math, there are over 200 introductions to be made in this example. There is a ton of networking activity to be had just by this handful of names you see here on your screen. Hard to believe, but it's true. Here we go. Fine, I'm going to wrap it up. Final networking tips before I recap. Make liberal use of web conferencing. And I bring this up because every time I watch this commercial, I can think of those 1 or 2 networking web conferences I had. If you're going to attend web conferencing, just make sure you don't look like the guy in the Downy commercial, okay? You make sure you're putting your best foot forward and that take a shot. Make sure that the image that you're portraying is exactly what you want to portray via your networking. Okay. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with wearing a t-shirt on a networking call. I'm just saying, at least make sure it's a good one. If someone can't describe what you do after the call, they were not listening, and vice versa. If you can't describe what they did, then you probably weren't listening in the call. You're not being a very effective or good networker. Always ask, why would this person be willing to take the call? Okay, if they feel like they're walking into a selling scenario, then they may not want to be a part of that. Microsoft bookings, I don't know if any of you out there utilize this. It's nothing short of a godsend in terms of getting stuff on the calendar. You obviously can't meet someone unless you schedule it. So happy to give a demo of that if anyone wants to see how it works. But for me, it worked great, simple to use, easy to set up. I strongly recommend it. Fodder for conversation within your networking introductions. From where do you source clients or contacts or networkers or colleagues? Where do you, this is me in a networking meeting, where do you source your other networkers contact? What's important to you? What type of relationships matter to you? What type of networking introductions are most helpful to you? Hey, let's connect on LinkedIn. My contacts are visible. You can click on my contacts and see the people to whom I'm contacting. Please let me know if there's anyone that would make a good networking introduction to you. I'll be upfront with you. I'll let you know if I know them well or if I don't. And at the very least, I can make a LinkedIn connect. I can make a LinkedIn introduction. They still have that, where you can put two people together. And if you don't know them that well, it's a great, easy out. Hey, I have a few ideas as to some introductions I can make to you. I'm going to follow up. I got your email address. I'm going to follow up with you. I have some people, and it's actually a good idea to have your own networking map in front of you when you're on these calls, in addition to taking notes, to make sure that you can get the most, that you can offer the most and get the most out of the networking relationship. In short, networking, your network is a valuable currency. You should build it, grow it, protect it, and spend it with care. So with that, recap. This is everything I would ask you to take away from the presentation. Networking is an altruistic exercise. Inventory, or as we were describing earlier, map, inventory your current network. Plan your networking 2 moves ahead. Always, always think about the other side's willingness to take the call. LinkedIn is a critical tool. Goes without saying. If you have other methods over and beyond LinkedIn, whether it be Facebook or other forms of social media, great. Don't prospect while networking. Don't network while prospecting. That's it. It's everything I wanted to get to today. I'll open up to Q&A if anyone wants to explore any of these concepts further, assuming we're doing okay for time.
Well, thank you, Carl. That was terrific. I got a lot out of it. I can say for my own benefit that something that has occurred recently, that I'm finding that when I have conversations with new contacts, when they identify who they would like to meet, or when I ask them to identify who I could introduce them to, it opens up a whole world of conversation and vice versa. And I try and make those conversations now. The other thing that I can say, because we're all growing and learning as we go, is it's never a tit for tat relationship. There's never one I'm looking for. Every accountant I meet wants to know, oh, who can you refer me to? Well, it's not people right away. It's not necessarily you're going to introduce them to clients. You're going to introduce them to other attorneys or other people that work within their field. And I think that's very important, because if you're counting who referred you and who you referred to, you'll never win at that game. It's about sharing and doing the right thing all the time. By the way, I want to welcome Richard Leff. He's our newest member, LIAFPN. Richard, you can kind of nod your head. Good. So thank you. Any other questions or comments from anyone?
I have one.
Sure, Adam.
Carl was fantastic. Larry Bloom invited me here today. So Larry, thank you for that. I built a business. My company is called Connections for Hire. Mm-hmm. And the reason I built this business, so my background is in business development. Mm-hmm. And I really found that networking was very broken. I really didn't enjoy it. A lot of people used to, call me like a master networker. And I wasn't always networking for prospects. I was networking to meet good resources, good people, good influencers, centers of influences. And I started my company about 2 years ago. And the reason I started my company is because I found that a lot of business owners weren't networking because they felt like they were just getting sold to.
Mhm.
And I really wanted to help business owners build strategic partnerships, centers of influences with business professionals that can become, I guess, strategic partners, alliances, whatever you want to call that.
Right.
And I network a lot. I'm introduced to about 100 new people a week. Like my centers of influences introduced me to about 100 new people a week. I vet them, I qualify them through LinkedIn before I have a conversation. I was making the connection for me before I take the meeting. And, I preach a lot about how, networking is, I call it relationships before business. Before we can work together, we got to get to know each other. We have to see that we like each other. You kind of re-inspired a lot of the hope that's been lost in my world in networking today. And, I just wanted to, I'll connect with you offline, but I just wanted to ask you, at what point did you say it was enough? And I don't know if it was creating, this presence or whatever it is, but, I said this is enough. And I started up a business literally connecting people because I was just so unhappy with the way that it was being done. When did you have that aha moment, and what was that aha moment or that tipping point for you?
Well, I'll tell you, it was a point, as I had mentioned, Excelsior got started as we were spun off from FCE at the end of 2018 and 2019. And my partner, Steve, who's on the call today, and we sat down and we said, well, we know how to set up and run fund of hedge funds, and we know who our clients are. And our clients are ultimately independent wealth managers managing between $100 and $2 billion. But how do we get closer to them? Because those are some of the most heavily marketed people in the United States. They hire people. They have receptionists and administrative staff, well trained on how to screen out cold calls and whatnot. I said, I don't want to just be the fifth cold call into these firms asking them if they'd like our services. I want to be relevant to these people. So for us, it really started as a prospecting exercise. But we said to ourselves, look, if we go into this and we're just pitching and they're just swinging, it's not going to work. So we have to find a way to be germane and help them understand that, look, while there may, we're always very clear about who our prospective clientele are, but that doesn't preclude us from networking. So if you make it clear to people up front, you're not pitching and you don't expect them to swing, and you want to have a legitimate networking conversation, and you demonstrate to them that you're capable of having that networking conversation, they'll have it. And now you have a network of people you can stay in front of, and they're always taking your call because you're always relevant to them. And they know you're not just calling to pitch them and pitch and hit. So that's the answer to your question, is the point at which I became a partner in my own firm for the second time in my career, and realized that the way I did it the first time, 10 plus years ago, wasn't the optimal way. So it became a matter of, it was a bit of a business development exercise, to answer your question.
Thank you.
I'd like
Hey,
to
Phil, Larry had a comment. So
just throw in a little 2 cents here. Knowing both Carl and Adam pretty well, I know both of them are very open to connecting. I'm not going to call it networking. I know that both of them are very open to connecting people and introducing people. Adam has a different approach. He's really trying to build a community of people that are connected socially more than professionally, and have common interests and want to do things together and network through unconventional sources. And he does some cool stuff, definitely does some cool stuff. And Carl, you've been very open to making introductions, and I'm obviously trying to return the favor. Like you said, his network is open for you to view on LinkedIn. So it's all about building bonds with people.
Thank you, Larry.
And Larry, how about the LIAFPN as far as the resources? And you were going to make mention.
Yeah, again, we're here to provide, different educational stuff. We provide these little webinars, seminars every other week on different topics. But what we're building here is a community of resources for each other, that if you run into a situation where you need somebody else's services in an area, we're here for you as an advisory board. there are other CPAs that are in this organization that I call my friends. And if I have a question, I can reach out to them. There are two people on the call right now, like Eric Fried, Phil Kanyuk, two friends of mine that I've tried to get business to in different ways, even though we're in the same profession. I don't look at us as competitors. They're resources for me. We specialize in different areas. Our client base is different. So there are opportunities for all of us. So.
Yeah, I'll follow that up, Larry, with one of my standard comments is I don't need a client code to answer a question. Call on me. I love to help, and I like to talk.
That's great. Speaking of which, I did offer multiple times throughout the presentation, as I call them, the money shots, the 5 slides with the cyan header. So I'm just going to throw my email address up there in the chat. Just shoot me a message, say, hey, attend your presentation. Can you send me those slides? Be happy to share them, because I basically forced everyone to put their pencils down.
That's cool. And we recorded this, Carl, and we'll send a recap to everybody. Phil Kanyuk, you had a question that
very quickly, and I'm sorry, my dog groomer's outside texting me to come get my dog. I had a fortunate to be introduced to a prominent matrimonial attorney who was very well known in the Nassau County Bar Association. And through that introduction, I got a nice lunch out of it, and we chatted, and I thought we made a connection. At the conclusion of the lunch, the matrimonial attorney said to me point blank, I don't refer business to any forensic accountants that don't send me business first to prove their referral ability. How would you respond to a statement like that, to someone that you thought you wanted to do business 30 seconds earlier?
Right. Well, I think right then and there, I would actually encourage you to think 2 moves ahead. So you're going to say, so they won't send me a target, I'll use in this case. They won't send me a target or a prospect unless I send them one. So that means they already have a group of people with whom they have that existing relationship. So already the hurdle to have that relationship is exceptionally high, because now you have to jump past the people with whom they already have that quid pro quo relationship. Point number 1. Point number 2, you have to ask yourself, is that a legitimate networking relationship, or is that a quid pro relationship? That's an explicit business relationship. And I get it. We're networking to advance our business agenda in most of the cases, and for the purpose of this crowd, maybe all of our cases. Okay, but you have to ask yourself, is that really networking, or is that creating a contract? And if that's the type of contract you want to have, I know plenty of, I interface with a lot of people who have those types of relationships, and it works for them. So that's fine. But you have to ask yourself, am I in a networking situation? At that point, I would argue you're not. You're no longer in a networking relationship. You're in a business relationship.
And I'm going
to pitching and hitting.
I got to qualify that statement with, if you're in forensic accounting and you just do forensic accounting as a CPA, and you don't have other clients that you see on a routine basis, you don't have the opportunity to refer. You're not the trusted advisor, and you don't have the opportunity to refer clients. So I thought that I just wasted an hour and a half lunch explaining my business model, what I'm all about. And if she had grasped that theory, I don't think the request or the demand would have been made.
I think
there's for the lunch.
Yeah, my answer was, well, I'm generally not the trusted advisor and not in a position to make those referrals. But what I can do for you is be a resource. So call on me when you have questions on other clients' cases or questions about other forensic accountants, and I'll give you a little assistance there. And that's how I can help you improve my worth.
Phil, what you could have done is said you were going to introduce her to the partners at your firm that have the direct connections with the clients.
I believe at that time I was with a boutique forensic accounting firm that just did forensic accounting. That was before I merged into the CPA practice when I was with Rand.
Hey guys, I don't
Larry,
like to pile on, but I just wanted to make a quick comment. It's Diane. Good to see many of you.
1 second.
Hi, Diane.
Hello. I was going to tell Phil, and he just went to get his dog. No, he's coming back. I was gonna say, and Carl, I would love your response to this. I think in a situation like that, the way I would have handled it was to ask them how they referred or how they enjoyed referring and what their process was, and just try to get the why coming out from them a little bit more versus feeling like I had to respond yes or no in the situation.
Well, yeah, in terms of an explicit response, I really defined, I defined whether or not you're in a networking conversation at that point. So my argument is clearly that you are not. More specifically, how to respond in that situation, it can be tricky. I know my response at times. Is to say, so is that to say the people with whom you're referring clients currently are always a fit for your clients? In other words, you're saying, I'm presuming, because you're a professional, or else we wouldn't be sitting here together. I'm presuming that you're only going to refer clients to the right professionals for their unique situation. So with that said, do you feel that you have the right referral relationships for every situation? And if the answer to that even might be no, then I think it's worth getting to know my firm and my services a little bit better. And then I really like what Philip had to say with regard to offering to be a resource nonetheless. But at that point, that's where networking takes a turn. And the scope of my presentation today is really keep it focused on networking. It's an awkward, there's no question that's an awkward conversation.
But a very common one. So playing chess and thinking 2 moves in advance, knowing that that's going to come up in many conversations, is a good one to prepare for.
Yeah, and the way my long-winded explanation, you heard me go through it on one of the slides. I'll tell people, look, if you're just looking to find people who are going to refer people back to you, that's a different game than the one I'm playing here. If you want to meet the people that I introduce you to because you think the people that they introduce you to will introduce you to someone who will, somewhere down the daisy chain of introductions, will result in bringing you closer to your target, whether that target's prospects, interests, or other, then I'm the right person for you to talk to. But if it's not, and if you're drilling down for the quid pro quo, then I may not be the right person for you to spend your networking time with. That's how I typically respond to that.
I have to give Phil a lot of credit and he gave that person a better answer probably than I would have given. I don't know if I'm the only one. That kind of encounter to me is so distasteful. I probably would have, I'm not even sure how I would have reacted. I probably would have in my mind said, well, thank you very much. I think that's the end of this. But that's me. That's me. I'm, you know, I think I come from a very altruistic area. I'm sorry?
The Nassau County Bar Association matrimonial group is a very tight-knit community of professionals.
Mm-hmm.
If I had told her what I really wanted to say, I probably would have gotten looked at badly by several people that I might have had a chance of working with. At that point, I thought, really don't have much of a chance of working with her. And I don't know that I want to, but let me be professional and do the right thing.
100%. I like I said, kudos to you. And I'm not sure how I would have handled it in the same situation, but you know, the way you handled it, I think was exactly very professional.
Eric, 2 years later, I met the same person at a charity event. And she introduced herself to me as if she'd never met me before.
And we all know people like that.
You also have to ask yourself, I'd ask everyone to ask yourself, who do you think has the bigger network? So in this case, do you think Philip has the broader network with more opportunities, or do you think the person who only operates on a quid pro quo parameters has the bigger network? My money's on Philip in that case, and that takes operating on a different level. And clearly, I'm taking the position that creates greater opportunity than the former. Any other questions?
This is Steve, Carl's partner. I would add to everything that Carl said was fantastic today. We work together, and so what we do is we always make sure we find time, and we set aside time for networking. So I mean, it's so easy to get lost in your day-to-day, But, whether it be Friday afternoon or maybe at the end of every day, put the time aside to make some introductions. Put the time aside to be responsive to somebody that reached out to you. Otherwise, you end up in that dead wood section, and you don't want to be there.
Yeah, Steve, I appreciate you mentioning that. And like Steve said, we do take the time to do that. I think up until this point, we started this effort in earnest around March. I counted, we actually just keep track of it so that we know how effective we're being. I think we made over 150 introductions so far this year, actually some to a number of people in this room. And to be clear, for those of you that, I've outlined, I kind of laid it all bare in terms of our networking approach, where we're focused. In some cases, I'm actually very specific about where we're expending our networking effort. And if you fit in any of those buckets and if you feel you legitimately understand the value of networking and the whole pay it forward mentality, you've got my email address. I'm happy to connect in that regard. And by the way, if I'm not networking in your circle, if there's any way I can get you closer to that circle, please let me know, because that really speaks to the spirit of what we're getting at here. But if you really want, if networking is critical to achieving to getting closer to that target, whatever it may be, okay, carving out time every week, creating that spreadsheet does not take a long time. That's a 15-minute exercise for any of you to, I don't care how many contacts you have. I may have over 1,000, but I can put that into that spreadsheet form pretty quickly. Doing that's easy, but coming back to it and actually using it for something, by all means, give yourself 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours a week, maybe in 2 different sessions, come in and do it in a group. If you want to create accountability for your networking, which sometimes feels like it's a nice to do if I get to it, create some internal accountability within your organization for networking so that everyone's doing it. That's how you really get results out of your networking effort. That's certainly what we do here.
Yeah, Adam?
Very quickly, Carl. Obviously, there's, we all have connections, that, 5 financial advisors or 10 CPAs or, labor and employment attorneys, whatever it is, from a loyalty standpoint and, not overwhelming yourself with, a fact where you need to be loyal to people, but you at the same time need to expand your work. Do you have any advice on that?
So I'm not sure I understand the question. So you're saying I want to network, but I have an obligation to certain groups of people?
Well, it's like, I know Larry. Larry's a CPA, and I've grown a really nice relationship with him. But it's like if somebody connects me to another CPA, it's like, well, I feel like I'm cheating on Larry in a sense, even though I could have 3, 4, and they could all work and specialize in different areas. What's your perspective on that?
Right. Well, you have to ask yourself whether or not you're in quid pro quo relationships or whether you're in networking relationships. And the fact of the matter is, look, I've had clients at every stage of my career. No 2 clients need the exact same thing. So at the end of the day, if someone, we'll pick on Larry because we both know him. Say to Larry, hey, Larry, not every client I meet who needs a CPA that specializes in your area is going to need you specifically. There might be better fits in other cases. If Larry, for argument's sake, couldn't wrap his head around that, was offended by that, then Larry's probably not the person you need to be networking with then in that regard. But of course, Larry is, and Larry understands that full well. And Larry understands the value of networking. The people who feel like, look, we're going to create this. There's actually an organization out there that this is their whole business model, but I'll refrain from mentioning their name. This whole we're going to lock in, and I refer to you, you refer to me, and anytime you need someone who does what I do, look, folks, it's not how business gets done. And if that's your model and that's the only way you're going to operate, you're going to find yourself with very limited opportunities. And you're also going to find yourself, frankly, in my industry where we're regulated by the SEC, you're going to find yourself in a situation where you're going to ask some tough questions by a regulator, saying, why was this the right fit for this particular person? Why was this solution recommended? If the answer is, well, I get paid more by referring you to the situation, you're going to be in a heap of trouble. So it can be problematic when that's the MO. So you're not cheating on the other people. Different clients have different needs and bond with different types of people. The type of people that might bond beautifully with Eric won't bond with Larry or vice versa. Okay, so it's all about putting clients with the right people with whom they're going to have the right professional relationship. And nobody should think they're so grand or so great that they're the answer to every client. If they are, you probably don't want to be networking with them.
Now, I just want to throw in there that when I talk to people about networking, they're so surprised in other industry, other spaces, let's say, at how well CPAs network with each other and build relationships, because there's so many different areas of specialization, so many different sizes of companies and focus, and there's enough business out there for all of us to be successful.
Each of the CPAs on this call today are different niche specialists.
Right.
And we're different sizes as well. So even if we all did the same thing, we might be small, medium, and large.
Right.
So we offer, oftentimes we make recommendations and give 2 or 3 options for the size or the specialization.
I know that a couple weeks ago, a month or 2 ago, I tried to get Eric into a client, a friend of mine, introduce him to somebody that was looking to change accounting firms. Eric has introduced me to potential clients, actually some that ultimately came on board. So that's the way we work.
And when it comes to other professionals, and Phil made it clear, a lot of times we do as accountants, when our clients are looking for an attorney or for a financial planner, we like to give a list of, a list of, and I did it recently with a client who, whose trust and estate attorney retired. And I said, look, here's a list of 3 attorneys that I work with and I'm comfortable with. And I'd like you to interview them and you make the choice, because unfortunately, if I introduce, one trust and estate attorney to a client and that trust and estate attorney turns out to be not, let's call it not compatible with that client, that makes me a bad accountant.
And where are you? Exactly.
Exactly. So I want to make sure that,
nobody's
if you're not happy with the attorney that you chose, okay, fine. I know several others. Here are some names. And again, I'm comfortable working with them. I'm comfortable with their knowledge and their client service. That's what works best, I think, for us.
Terrific. Listen, I know a lot of people have meetings. I do want to, cut this short. You're welcome to continue talking, and I thank everybody for coming. I want to encourage people who aren't members to become members. It's a very nominal fee. The fee actually goes towards putting these meetings together, doing the marketing, doing the advertising, and it goes to your profession in building your network of quality people that you can have a resource to, get a little education from, and we do some charity work as well. Altruistically, as a group, we're much stronger than we are as individuals. So again, thanks again.
Neil, next meeting, did we set the topic?
Yes, actually, Diane was going to be talking about exit strategy. She runs an exit strategy network. She was on the phone earlier. We have future meetings towards a range of topics, and very excited about that. So
Terrific. Well, thanks for the great Q&A, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
And you've got my contact information if there's any incremental follow-up or if you'd like a copy of the key slides. But really appreciate everyone's attention and the great Q&A.
Carl, thank you. It was a great presentation.
Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Take care.
Good day, everyone. Take care.